From a flicker of candlelight in 1789 to the glare of modern screens in the West Wing, every president has held the pen. Executive orders not passed by Congress, but etched into law by command. Some shaped history. Some sparked controversy. Others were forgotten. Until now. This is where we break them down. Every signature, every shift in power, every consequence still felt today. From Washington to Biden, welcome to Executive Order Watch.
Democracy, we live for it. For democracy, we fight for it. For democracy, we've died for it. And for democracy, we watch it. This is Executive Order.
1986, a year that shook America's confidence and tested the very core of presidential leadership. Ronald Reagan, in the 6th year of his presidency, stood tall before a divided world, but also a nation beginning to question the consequences of its boldness abroad. This was no longer the Reagan of 1981. This was a president seasoned by triumphs, haunted by missteps, and staring down one of the deepest political storms of the decade. At the start of the year, Reagan's approval remained high. The economy had stabilized from the shocks of the early 1980s. Inflation was under control. Unemployment was down. To many, the Morning in America campaign from his re-election still felt real. But then, tragedy struck. On January 28th, the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded just 73 seconds after launch, killing all 7 astronauts aboard, including Krista McAuliffe, the first civilian teacher in space. It was a national trauma. In the face of mourning, Reagan delivered one of his most memorable addresses, a short, solemn tribute that captured the nation's heartbreak and resilience. "They slipped the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God," he said. America listened, and in that moment, Reagan again became a unifier. But unity would soon be tested. By mid-year, whispers turned to investigations, and headlines began to reveal a secret operation brewing under the surface. A covert plan involving arms sales to Iran and the funneling of profits to Contra rebels in Nicaragua. The Iran-Contra affair would unravel publicly in the months ahead, igniting the deepest constitutional crisis of Reagan's presidency. Yet through it all, Reagan maintained a calculated calm. His leadership style in 1986 was more delegative than direct, relying heavily on trusted advisors, emphasizing image, and using the presidential pulpit to deliver conviction without always showing the mechanics behind it. Internationally, Reagan's posture was mixed. In April, the U.S. launched airstrikes against Libya, codenamed Operation El Dorado Canyon, in retaliation for a Berlin nightclub bombing that killed American servicemen. It was controversial, but decisive, a message to state sponsors of terror that the U.S. would strike back. Meanwhile, arms control talks with the Soviet Union advanced. Gorbachev and Reagan met in Reykjavik, Iceland, and though the summit ended without an agreement, it brought the two sides closer to reducing nuclear stockpiles than ever before. Domestically, Reagan continued to push for deregulation, tax reform, and cuts to social programs. That same year, the groundwork was laid for the Tax Reform Act of 1986, a sweeping overhaul that would become law later in the year, flattening tax brackets and eliminating loopholes. And while Wall Street thrived, many Americans in inner cities and rural towns felt left behind. The fault lines of inequality, the early roots of the crack epidemic, and widening wealth gaps were rarely at the center of Reagan's message. Still, his supporters viewed 1986 as a continuation of bold American strength, while critics saw it as a year when the costs of unchecked power began to surface. "Now we hold off," just for a moment, on the executive orders of this critical year. Because before we jump into those actions, the quiet ones, signed with a pen but echoing through time, we must understand the backdrop. A nation grappling with mourning, might, and moral ambiguity. A president on the edge of scandal, still commanding the stage. Next, we'll break down the executive orders of 1986, one by one, and reveal the choices that shaped not only that turbulent year, but the decades that followed. Stay tuned.
Folks, let's talk about the second term of President Ronald Reagan, how he won it, what it meant, and the world around him when he did. Now look, 1984 wasn't just another election year. It was a cultural moment, a political tidal wave. Reagan didn't just win, he dominated. He ran for re-election with confidence, optimism, and a message that struck a deep chord with Americans across the spectrum. His slogan, "It's morning again in America." And for many Americans, especially after the economic turmoil of the late 70s and early 80s, that message hit home. He ran against a man I knew well, Walter Mondale, former vice president under Jimmy Carter, a smart, decent man, a policy mind. But 1984 wasn't a year for wonky details. It was a year where storytelling mattered, where image, tone, and emotional connection won the day. And Reagan, that former actor from Hollywood, he had it down to a science. The result, a landslide. Reagan carried 49 out of 50 states. That's right, 525 electoral votes to Mondale's 13. The only state Mondale won was his own, Minnesota, and even that was by less than 1%. It was the largest electoral college victory in modern American history. A true political juggernaut. But elections don't happen in a vacuum. The world in 1984 was shifting under our feet. The Cold War was still very real, but tensions had begun to shift. The Soviet Union had lost Leonid Brezhnev just a few years earlier, and now a new generation of leadership, names like Gorbachev, were on the horizon. Apple launched the Macintosh. That little computer with a screen and a mouse changed everything, including how future presidents would campaign and communicate. The HIV/AIDS crisis was growing rapidly, though the federal response, including under Reagan, was still painfully slow. It would become one of the defining silences of that administration. Geraldine Ferraro, Mondale's running mate, became the first woman ever nominated on a major party ticket for vice president. It was historic, and it planted seeds for generations of women to come. AT&T was broken up, ending its telephone monopoly and opening the door for the telecom boom that followed. And on the global front, India's Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was assassinated. Famine gripped Ethiopia, leading to the We Are the World movement. The globe was watching itself more closely, and America was still the lens. Back at home, Reagan won not just because of what he did, but because of how he made people feel. He sold hope, he sold pride, and in 1984, the American people bought it by the millions. But winning big comes with big responsibilities. And in Reagan's second term, those responsibilities would multiply, from Cold War diplomacy to covert conflicts in Central America, from domestic tax reforms to rising deficits, from the silence on AIDS to the roar of the Iran-Contra scandal still ahead. We'll get to all that and more. So stay tuned, because the story of Reagan's second term is more than a victory lap. It's a window into how power is used, tested, and remembered. And as always, here on For Democracy, we'll bring the history straight to the people. We'll see you next time, when we dive into 1986 and the executive orders that shaped the early pulse of Reagan's final act.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. 1986. That was a year of hard lessons and hard choices. A year when the strength of a nation and the character of its leader were tested not just in moments of celebration, but in moments of sorrow, scrutiny, and soul-searching. We began that year full of optimism. The Space Shuttle Challenger was set to carry the first civilian teacher into space. I remember watching with the rest of the country, feeling that same excitement that's defined our American spirit. And then, just moments after liftoff, tragedy struck. 7 brave souls were lost. I had to look into the eyes of a grieving nation that night. And I told our children, the future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted, it belongs to the brave. I still believe that. But courage wasn't just needed in the stars. It was needed here, on Earth, especially in the Oval Office. That same year, a difficult truth came to light. News broke that arms had been sold to Iran and the funds directed to support Contra fighters in Nicaragua. I know the gravity of that moment. It shook the trust of many. People asked, what did the president know? And I've said before, and I'll say again, I never traded arms for hostages. But I understand how it looked, and I take full responsibility for how this came to be. I've always believed in confronting communism, standing up for freedom, and pushing back against tyranny in every corner of the world. That's what guided our efforts in Central America. But even noble intentions need lawful paths. That's a truth I carry with me. Still, the year wasn't only marked by crisis, it was also a year of bold action. Together, with leaders from both parties, we passed the Tax Reform Act of 1986. It was the most sweeping change to the tax code in generations, simplifying rates, closing loopholes, and giving working Americans a little more breathing room. And on the world stage, I sat across from Mikhail Gorbachev in Reykjavik, Iceland. We didn't strike a final deal, but we came closer than ever to rethinking the balance of nuclear power. We talked not as enemies, but as men with shared responsibilities. That meeting set the stage for what would come in the years ahead. Now, I've always said, the greatest leaders don't just sign laws, they shape direction. But behind every speech and summit, there's the machinery of governance. That's where executive orders come in. Quiet tools that set the wheels in motion, across agencies, across borders, across time. I signed many of them in 1986, and while they may not make headlines, they made a difference. In defense strategy, in veterans affairs, in economic planning. Some of them still echo today. We'll take a closer look at those next. Because every decision has a consequence, and every action, whether in ink or in voice, is part of the story we leave behind. Executive Order 12,543, prohibiting trade and certain transactions involving Libya on January 7, 1986. Executive Order 12,544, blocking Libyan government property in the United States or held by U.S. persons on January 8, 1986. Executive Order 12,545, National Commission on Space on January 14, 1986. Executive Order 12,546, Presidential Commission on the Space Shuttle Challenger accident on February 3, 1986. Executive Order 12,547, establishing procedures for facilitating presidential review of international aviation decisions submitted by the Department of Transportation on February 6, 1986. Executive Order 12,548, grazing fees on February 14, 1986. Executive Order 12,549, debarment and suspension on February 18, 1986. Executive Order 12,550, amendments to the Manual for Courts-Martial, United States, 1984 on February 19, 1986. Executive Order 12,551. The President's Export Council on February 21, 1986. Executive Order 12,552, Productivity Improvement Program for the Federal Government on February 25, 1986. Executive Order 12,553, Revocation of various executive orders on February 25, 1986. Executive Order 12,554, Nuclear Cooperation with Euratom on February 28, 1986. Executive Order 12,555, Protection of Cultural Property on March 10, 1986. Executive Order 12,556, Mailing Privileges of Members of Armed Forces of the United States and of Friendly Foreign Nations on April 16, 1986. Executive Order 12,557, Establishing an Emergency Board to investigate disputes between the Maine Central Railroad Company and Portland Terminal Company and certain of their employees represented by the Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way employees on May 16, 1986. Executive Order 12,558, establishing an emergency board to investigate a dispute between the Long Island Railroad and certain labor organizations representing its employees on May 16, 1986. Executive Order 12,559, exclusions from the Federal Labor Management Relations Program on May 20, 1986. Executive Order 12,560 Administration of Foreign Relations and Related Functions on May 24, 1986. Executive Order 12,561 delegating certain functions of the President relating to federal civilian employee and contractor travel expenses on July 1, 1986. Executive Order 12,562 establishing an emergency board to investigate disputes between certain railroads represented by the National Carriers Conference Committee of the National Railway Labor Conference and their employees represented by certain labor organizations on July 15, 1986. Executive Order 12,563, establishing an emergency board to investigate a dispute between the Long Island Railroad and certain labor organizations representing its employees on September 12, 1986. Executive Order 12,564, drug-free federal workplace on September 15, 1986. Executive Order 12,565, prescribing a comprehensive system of financial reporting for officers and employees in the executive branch on September 25, 1986. Executive Order 12,566, safety belt use requirements for federal employees on September 26, 1986. Executive Order 12,567, Inter-American Investment Corporation, Commission for the Study of Alternatives to the Panama Canal and Pacific Salmon Commission on October 2, 1986. Executive Order 12,568 employment opportunities for military spouses at non-appropriated fund activities on October 2986. Executive Order 12,569 management of the Compact of Free Association with the Republic of the Marshall Islands, the Federated States of Micronesia, and the Republic of Palau on October 16, 1986. Executive Order 12,570. Delegating authority to implement assistance for Central American democracies and the Nicaraguan democratic resistance on October 24, 1986. Executive Order 12,571. Implementation of the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act on October 27, 1986. Executive Order 12,572. Relations with the Northern Mariana Islands on November 3, 1986. Executive Order 12,573, amending Executive Order No. 11,157 as it relates to incentive pay for hazardous duty on November 6, 1986. Executive Order 12,574, establishing an experimental program within the President's Commission on Executive Exchange on November 20, 1986. Executive Order 12,575, President's Special Review Board on December 1, 1986. Executive Order 12,576, Victims of Terrorism Compensation on December 2986. Executive Order 12,577. Closing of government departments and agencies on Friday, December 26, 1986. On December 22, 1986, Executive Order 12,578, adjustments of certain rates of pay and allowances on December 31, 1986. Executive Order 12,579, President's Advisory Committee on Mediation and Conciliation on December 31, 1986. Executive Order 12,505, Procedures for an Export Licensing Policy as to Foreign Policy Export Controls on May 20, 1985. Executive Order 12,506, President's Commission on Privatization on June 28, 1985. Executive Order 12,507. Establishing the Emergency Board to investigate a dispute between the Port Authority Trans-Hudson Corporation and its employees on July 1, 1985. Executive Order 12,508. Establishing the Emergency Board to investigate a dispute between the Long Island Railroad and its employees on July 1, 1985. Executive Order 12,509. President's Commission on Industrial Competitiveness on July 2, 1985. Executive Order 12,510, amending the Generalized System of Preferences on July 11, 1985.
Pauline's Pizza.
Hello
where we
again,
deliver
folks.
happiness one slice at a time. What's your craving today? Yeah, hi. Is Seymour there?
Oh, Seymour. I think he might be busy making our special pies. But hey, why not swing by the pizzeria? We've got a pie with your name on it. Anything else I can help you with?
I was looking for Seymour Butts.
Ah, I see. Well, if you're looking for Seymour Butts, he might be hiding behind a pepperoni slice. Anything else I can do for you today?
No, that's it.
Hi, I'm Terrence, a marketing professional with a passion for helping your business grow smarter and faster. Here at Da Bomb Digital Media, based right here in Atlanta, Georgia, we specialize in bringing your vision to life. Whether you're launching your first website or reimagining your entire digital presence, we've got you covered. From modern website design and search engine optimization to setting up your own AI-powered agency tools, we deliver innovative solutions that keep you ahead of the curve. Ready to unlock your business's full potential? Let's build something remarkable together. For more information, visit our YouTube channel. Just search Da Bomb Digital Media on YouTube and start exploring tips, success stories, and everything you need to elevate your brand.
Hello again, folks. Let's take a moment to travel back to the year 1986, a time of tremendous challenge and dramatic change here in the United States and across the globe. It was President Ronald Reagan's 6th year in office, and like many presidents before him, he wielded the power of executive orders to push forward a vision of America that was both bold and deeply controversial. Now, let's be clear. 1986 wasn't just another chapter. It was a turning point. It was the year we lost the Challenger crew in a tragic shuttle disaster that shook our nation's faith in progress and technology. It was also the year the Iran-Contra affair began to unfold, an episode that raised grave constitutional questions about presidential overreach, secrecy, and the limits of executive authority. Against that backdrop, President Reagan signed dozens of executive orders. Some were routine, pay adjustments, advisory boards, emergency labor panels, but others, well, they reshaped how our government operated and how it was perceived both at home and abroad. One of the defining executive orders of that year was EO 12564, the Drug-Free Federal Workplace Order. This was a bold move in Reagan's war on drugs, mandating that all federal employees be drug-free and subject to testing. Now, some praised it as a necessary step to ensure discipline and integrity in government. Others saw it as a prelude to wider surveillance and a shift toward punitive policies over treatment and care. The effects of that order are still debated today, especially in a time when our nation reconsiders drug policy, addiction, and justice through a more humane lens. Then there was EO 12553, an executive order that revoked more than 100 older EOs in one stroke. Reagan wanted to declutter and modernize federal authority. Some say it was needed. Others believe that buried in that revocation were protections and processes, especially in areas like civil defense and economic regulation, that deserved more scrutiny before being erased. In foreign policy, Reagan was crystal clear. Through Executive Orders 12,543 and 12,544, he took swift action to isolate Libya, blocking property and cutting trade in response to acts of terror. These actions sent a message about America's stance against state-sponsored terrorism. But they also hardened U.S.-Arab tensions in ways that still echo through our foreign policy playbook. And let's not forget Executive Order 12,571, implementing the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act. This one stands out. Congress passed that law over Reagan's veto, but the executive order still ensured implementation. It's a complicated legacy. Reagan was slow to condemn apartheid, but once it was law, the machinery of government responded. That's the power of an EO, to enforce what the people through their representatives have demanded. Now, folks, every executive order is a brushstroke on the canvas of history. In 1986, Reagan painted with a bold, conservative palette, military strength, deregulation, and tough-on-crime approaches. Some of those brushstrokes faded. Others etched themselves deep into our laws, our norms, and our institutions. Next, we're going to take a closer look at the top 10 executive orders of 1986, the ones that left a permanent mark, for better or worse, on the American experience. So stick with me. Truth seekers, history lovers, patriots of all stripes, your journey through Executive Order Watch isn't over. We've looked at the forest. Now let's examine the most significant trees. Hello again, truth seekers. Today we're going back to a year that cracked the surface of American confidence. 1986. A year of triumphs, tragedies, and decisions that still echo in every branch of our government. I was there in the Senate, watching history unfold in real time. And let me tell you, Ronald Reagan's pen was busy that year. He signed nearly 40 executive orders in 1986. Some were administrative, others carried sweeping national and international impact. Let's talk about how those executive orders shaped the world then and how they're still impacting the present. Major events that shaped 1986 global events: Chernobyl nuclear disaster, April 26th. A Soviet reactor exploded, releasing radioactive fallout across Europe. It shattered faith in nuclear safety and accelerated anti-nuclear movements worldwide. Halley's Comet passed Earth in a once-in-a-lifetime celestial event, uniting humanity in awe of the cosmos. Reagan and Gorbachev met in Reykjavik, Iceland, October. Though no treaty was signed, the summit laid groundwork for future arms reduction between superpowers. Domestic U.S. events: Space Shuttle Challenger explosion, January 28th. The shuttle broke apart just 73 seconds after launch, killing all 7 crew members. It brought the space program to a grinding halt and sparked intense federal review. Iran-Contra scandal started to unravel. A secret deal involving arms sales to Iran and illegal funding to Nicaraguan rebels began to surface, questioning the reach of presidential authority. Tax Reform Act of 1986 signed into law, one of the most sweeping reforms in U.S. tax history, simplifying brackets but shifting burdens in ways still debated today. How Reagan's executive orders affected 1986 and the present. Let's be real. Executive orders are powerful tools, and President Reagan used them with confidence. Here's what they did then and how they shape today. Expanded the drug-free workplace era. EO 12,564 mandated federal employees remain drug-free. It fueled Reagan's war on drugs, setting the tone for widespread drug testing. But it also laid groundwork for the modern criminalization of addiction, something we're still working to reverse in today's justice reform movements, cutting red tape or erasing protections. EO 12,553 revoked over 100 past executive orders. It was framed as cleaning house, but critics argue it may have quietly erased rules protecting workers, minorities, or economic oversight during key post-war eras. Standing against apartheid, reluctantly, EO 12,571 implemented the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act. Congress overrode Reagan's veto, and this EO forced federal compliance. It helped isolate South Africa's regime and played a role in ending apartheid. That's legacy. Global messaging through Libya Sanctions Executive Order 12,543 and Executive Order 12,544 froze Libyan assets and prohibited U.S. trade. It was America's sharp rebuke to state-sponsored terrorism. Today, those orders form part of the template for modern sanctions policy, especially in places like Iran, North Korea, and Russia. Safety in the aftermath of disaster. In response to the Challenger disaster, Reagan signed Executive Order 12,546, forming the Presidential Commission on the Space Shuttle Challenger accident. The commission's work not only reformed NASA, it shaped today's aerospace safety protocol still used by SpaceX, Boeing, and others. Top 10 executive orders of 1986, in depth. Number 1 executive order, 12,564, drug-free federal workplace, signed September 15th, 1986, Federal Register, citation 51 FR 32,889. President Reagan's Executive Order 12,564 stands as one of the most consequential and controversial executive orders of the late 20th century. This order established the requirement for all federal employees to refrain from using illegal drugs, both on and off duty. It authorized drug testing for federal workers in sensitive positions and paved the way for random testing throughout the federal government. Its immediate intent was clear: reinforce public confidence in government integrity and reinforce Reagan's war on drugs. However, the long-term effects were sweeping. It expanded the federal government's surveillance of its own employees and inspired private sector employers to adopt similar testing policies, turning workplace drug testing into a national standard. Today, over 50 million American workers are subject to drug testing policies that trace back to this order. While supporters tout its role in improving safety and accountability, critics argue it blurred the line between personal privacy and professional responsibility. It also disproportionately affected marginalized communities and led to thousands of dismissals that are still debated in terms of fairness and legality. Number 2, Executive Order 12,571, Implementation of the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act. Signed, October 27, 1986. Federal Register. Citation, 51 FR 39505. Despite President Reagan vetoing the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act, Congress overrode him, and this executive order enforced its provisions. EO 12571 ensured full implementation of sanctions against the South African apartheid regime, including bans on investment, trade, and support for the government security apparatus. Though Reagan's support for the bill was reluctant, the executive order marked a turning point in American civil rights diplomacy, aligning U.S. policy with the global movement to pressure South Africa. This action helped delegitimize the apartheid system on the world stage and indirectly contributed to Nelson Mandela's eventual release and democratic reform in South Africa. The order signaled that executive power could be used, even under pressure, to reinforce global human rights, and it established mechanisms still in place today for sanctioning regimes engaged in systemic oppression. Number 3, Executive Order 12,553, Revocation of Various Executive Orders. Signed February 25, 1986. Federal Register. Citation, 51 FR 7237. In what was essentially a mass repeal, EO 12,553 revoked over 100 prior executive orders, some dating as far back as the early 1900s. Reagan positioned this act as a house-cleaning measure, streamlining federal bureaucracy and eliminating outdated or unnecessary rules. However, this sweeping rollback has generated lasting controversy. Many of the revoked orders pertain to civil defense, economic regulation, and wartime administrative authorities. Some historians argue that Reagan may have dismantled critical protections without a full public debate or legal review, hiding substantive policy shifts under the guise of administrative reform. To this day, legal scholars refer to Executive Order 12,553 as a cautionary tale about the unchecked breadth of revocation power. It showed how executive orders can be reversed in large numbers with a single stroke of the pen, without input from Congress or the public. Number 4, Executive Order 12,543, Prohibiting Trade with Libya. Signed January 7, 1986, Federal Register. Citation, 51 FR 875 bombings linked to Libya. Reagan took decisive economic action. EO 12,543 imposed a trade embargo on Libya, cutting off American businesses and halting nearly all financial transactions. This was a significant escalation of U.S. foreign policy. It marked one of the first times economic sanctions were used as a direct counterterrorism tool. The order formed the backbone of America's long-standing sanctions infrastructure, used later against nations like Iran, North Korea, and Syria. More than a reactive policy, it helped establish sanctions as an alternative to military intervention, a strategy still employed today. It also reinforced America's leadership role in shaping international pressure campaigns. Number 5, Executive Order 12,544, Blocking Libyan Government Property. Signed January 8, 1986. Federal Register. Citation, 51 FR 1235, issued just one day after EO 12,543. This companion order froze all Libyan government assets in the United States or held by U.S. persons. It was meant to prevent financial support of terror networks and cut off Muammar Gaddafi's ability to operate globally. This order played a pivotal role in shaping modern Treasury Department sanction enforcement. The tools developed from Executive Order 12,544 would later be used in the Patriot Act era to block terrorist financing and control the flow of money in international threats. It also marked one of the earliest examples of the U.S. using financial levers as national security weapons, a doctrine that defines today's foreign policy strategy. Number 6, Executive Order 12,546, Challenger Accident Commission. Signed February 3, 1986. Federal Register. Citation 51 FR 4475. Just days after the Challenger disaster, which killed 7 astronauts, including teacher Krista McAuliffe, Reagan created the Rogers Commission through EO 12546. This group was tasked with uncovering the technical and managerial causes behind the tragedy. The Commission's findings revolutionized NASA's safety standards, bringing in redundant system reviews, whistleblower protections, and stricter materials protocols. EO 12546 stands as a testament to the government's responsibility to investigate itself after failure, a practice that became essential after later disasters like the Columbia incident and 9/11. This order helped restore public confidence in space exploration and remains a model for government accountability following catastrophe. Number 7, Executive Order 12565, Financial Disclosure in the Executive Branch, signed September 25, 1986. Federal Register, citation 51 FR 34437 EO 12565, required senior federal officials to publicly disclose personal financial information, aiming to root out conflicts of interest. It amended earlier ethics orders and became a pillar of the Office of Government Ethics OGE framework. This executive order institutionalized a culture of transparency and ethics oversight in the federal workforce. It laid the groundwork for today's routine vetting of executive appointees and continues to serve as a foundation for public trust in government integrity. The ripple effect includes legislation like the Stock Act and ongoing pressure for Supreme Court justices to submit similar disclosures. Number 8, Executive Orders 12,557 and 12,558. Emergency Boards for Railroad Disputes. Signed May 16, 1986. Federal Register citations 51 FR 18,429 and 18,431, facing labor unrest between key freight railroads and unionized workers. Reagan invoked his authority under the Railway Labor Act to create emergency mediation boards. These orders prevented nationwide transportation disruptions, which would have paralyzed logistics, agriculture, and energy sectors. While these EOs might seem procedural, they reflect a critical balance between labor rights and economic continuity. The board successfully negotiated resolutions that kept goods moving, highlighting the power of the executive to intervene peacefully in labor crises without legislation. Number 9, Executive Order 12,552, Federal Productivity Program, signed February 25, 1986. Federal Register citation 51 FR 7041, aimed at improving the efficiency of the federal government. This order established performance goals, metrics, and incentive systems for civil servants. Reagan believed government should operate more like a business, and Executive Order 1252 was his experiment in that philosophy. While its initial impact was modest, it helped spark a longer conversation about government performance management. It influenced later efforts like GPRA, Government Performance and Results Act, and OMB's performance scorecards still used today. It also seeded the idea that government accountability should be measured, not assumed, an idea that continues to guide federal modernization efforts. Number 10, Executive Order 12,566, Safety Belt Use for Federal Employees. Signed September 26, 1986, Federal Register citation 51 FR 34575. This seemingly simple directive mandated seatbelt use for all federal employees operating or riding in government vehicles. At a time when seatbelt laws were still debated in many states, Reagan's order put the federal government ahead of the curve. It signaled that public safety starts with example, and many state governments followed with similar rules. Today, seatbelt use is nearly universal, and studies show thousands of lives are saved every year thanks to the normalization this EO helped initiate. It was a small act, but with massive, lasting implications. Final thoughts: 1986 was not a quiet year. It was an inflection point. Reagan's executive orders reflected both the urgency and ideology of that era: strong national defense, deregulation, a crackdown on drugs, and a complex relationship with transparency. But we also saw how unchecked executive power, like in the Iran-Contra scandal, can erode trust in government if accountability isn't baked in. The legacy of 1986 is still alive in our airports, in our civil service, in how we handle crises, and in the policies that frame how government touches your life today. And now, let's dig deeper. Coming up next, we'll take a closer look at the details of each of those top 10 executive orders, how they were written, how they were enforced, and how they continue to influence your rights, your privacy, and your freedom. Until then, remember, we live for democracy. We die for democracy. We tell the truth for democracy. This is Executive Order Watch. Stay tuned.
Some write history with blood, some with laws. But the sharpest stroke comes from the pen. Executive power ain't just a tool. It's a weapon wielded by the few, affecting the many. They sign it. We live it. They order it. We obey it. Here, watching, digging, remembering. From the plantation to the proclamation, from internment camps to civil rights stands, from surveillance laws to student loan draws. Order can change your life, and you might not even know it, but now you do. So stay locked in, stay woke, stay sharp. We ain't just talking about power, we tracking it. Executive Order Watch, and we ain't blinking.